what to make of Oregon quarterback Ty Thompson's performance in the first scrimmage of fall camp. A lot of people get excited. Thompson's the highest rated recruit to sign with the Ducks at quarterback in program history. So there's a lot going on just story-wise there, but he's finally here. We got to see him in the spring game, saw him in the spring practices as well. Thought he looked good, but obviously some moments that were a little revealing as far as, this guy is still a freshman. But I want to talk about what I saw from him at Autzen Stadium in the scrimmage on Saturday. It's worth mentioning that when we met with Mario Cristobal on Monday following practice, that he had a little bit more time to sit with his offensive staff, go watch the film and kind of dissect the scrimmage a little bit more. And he wasn't shy about saying that Ty Thompson played the best of the quarterbacks for Oregon on Saturday's scrimmage. And, on the one hand, that's encouraging to hear because you want to look at, the future of the program, how recruits are panning out. But at the same time, with Anthony Brown being, more or less tabbed the guy, QB1, at least heading into this first game against Fresno State, might be a little concerning. You want to hear his name maybe mentioned a little bit more when you're talking about the scrimmage. Also worth mentioning, when we talked to Cristobal on Monday, they said that the staff pulled him a little bit because they thought his arm was overused a little bit, didn't want him getting injured or anything getting complicated there. So that's more or less, I'm paraphrasing, but that's more or less what he said. He did say that he felt that the staff felt his arm was overused. That was a direct quotation. But back to Thompson and what we saw from him on Saturday. This dude, even though he's a freshman, I just feel like, the way that he was, dissecting the game and operating, he was decisive. He was confident in his throws. The ball was just firing out there. It was looking lively. I mean, he might have the best arm strength out of anybody on this team. And I think at this point, most people are probably on the same page as far as him being the most gifted quarterback on the Oregon roster right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's ready to see game reps at this time. And that's one of the nice things about fall camp is that you get to work through these types of things. They had the scrimmage last week. We'll have another scrimmage this week, and we'll get to see where that growth kind of comes from. But, to talk more about the throws that we saw out there and just how he was playing, I think one of the things that I liked the most was that he was taking risks. He was throwing into tight windows, trying to connect with his guys. And he was really in sync. I mean, he had some comeback routes kind of close to the sideline, and that thing was just getting fired out on time, on target for the most part. He had some throws that, a couple were too high or some were underthrown, kind of couldn't sync up with his guy. I think he had one to CJ Verdell when Verdell wasn't turned around yet. But, when we're just looking at this, lots of positive things to take away. He was one of my top performers. And I asked Mario Cristobal what he thought about Thompson's performance following the scrimmage on Saturday. Here's what he had to say. Sure. Thompson, definitely a guy that looked pretty good out there today. I thought, ball coming out fast and, taking some shots at tight windows. What are maybe some parts of his game that maybe look ahead of schedule of your typical freshman?
I think you hit it on the head. He was decisive tonight. When there was pressure, he found a way out most of the time. Towards the end of the game, towards the end of the 2-minute drill, he didn't eat the ball. Sometimes a freshman will say, I don't want to throw an interception, he'll eat the ball, the clock runs out, and you're dead. Now that one scenario, he got lucky, had 1 second on the clock. But aside from that, he was very precise for most of the evening. Thought he made good decisions in the running game as well. The RPO decisions, they looked like they were really good. He's a really good football player. The sky's the limit for Ty.
So definitely some good words there from the head man himself regarding Thompson. When we're looking back at, his performance in the spring game and kind of more of my thoughts on what I saw out there at Autzen Stadium, the dude looked poised. He really did. And I think that that's something that, all the physical things are great, but that's one of the intangibles that it's hard to teach. It's hard to get somebody, sometimes you have to get them in the system for a while, get a lot of reps under there before they're really feeling confident and poised at the college level. That's a big jump to make. And maybe that speaks to part of the reason why he wanted to get here early so he could adjust to the speed of the game, right? But that was really big, and it kind of made me think a little bit about Marcus Mariota. I'm not saying that they're the same player, that they're even similar in play style, but when a lot of people were looking at Mariota when he was here in Eugene earlier, earlier in his playing career, they were saying, this guy's young, but wow, he's so poised and he's just doing a good job, under pressure. He's not freaking out and making, dumb decisions. And that's what I saw from Thompson. He looked poised and he was navigating the pocket really well in the face of pressure, stepping aside and, scrambling out a little bit, but he wasn't just taking off and running just for the heck of it. He wasn't doing it unless he really had to. And I think that when we're talking about mobility, a lot of people just think about running quarterbacks, but you look at guys like, let's see, Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, and the NFL. Rodgers is definitely faster than Roethlisberger, but they both do a really good job at extending the play, right? Even if they're not taking off to run necessarily, they're, extending the play, waiting for guys to get open and battle against their matchup. And I think that I saw a lot of that from Thompson. He threw on the run really, really well on Saturday, and just all of his game just looks just so tight and crisp, and it's just so fun to watch. And then another thing that's worth mentioning here is that he didn't turn over the ball at all. I think it's worth noting that none of the quarterbacks turned it over. As far as I know, you had that one deep ball during the scrimmage, and then Darren Barkins ripped it out. I think that was the only turnover that we saw. We saw that, and then we also saw, I think it was Jay Butterfield pitching it to Travis Dye, and then that was a fumble as well. But when we're talking about Ty specifically, no turnovers. He was almost picked by Brian Addison, but we saw some throws that were maybe a little bit testy. But I think overall what I'm saying is that's good. We're on the same page there. And, just talking about a couple other highlights here in this analysis piece. He had a deep ball to Tevin Jennis, which was really good to see. You want to see a guy pushing the ball down the field some more. He had a couple 15-yard gains here. You'd like to see that versus a guy who's kind of just dinking and dunking, playing it safe and not really moving the chains. So that was awesome to see. Like I said, he scrambled a bit. We saw him connect with Chris Hudson multiple times during the third down situation portion of the scrimmage. And then he also went deep for a first down during that third down position portion of the scrimmage. So I think that's so big because I know I'm talking to these recruits that the Ducks are looking at, and, they're telling me, hey, year 2 of Joe Moorhead, I'm hoping they can open things up a little bit, take some shots, push the ball deep down the field. And I think another reason that's so important is when we saw Justin Herbert here, we saw how limited his play was by the play calling. And then he gets to the NFL and he's just lighting things up and just showing off his cannon of an arm. So I think that's going to be really big for whoever ends up being quarterback for Oregon this year, right? Ty Thompson could end up being that guy. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit later, but really like what I saw from him in the scrimmage. He ran with the ones for a small portion of the scrimmage during the red zone portion. He had one of the drives that he finished off with a QB keeper for a touchdown. And then, like I said, wasn't necessarily a perfect performance. No, but I think that it was really, really encouraging. And it's also worth saying, just being realistic, it was just one scrimmage. There's still some stuff that needs to happen, obviously, in order for him to really see some meaningful time, as the starting quarterback, as we get closer to game week against Fresno State. And then I'll just wrap it up with this, kind of when you're looking at a performance like this, all the good things that the coaches are saying about him, it makes you kind of think, well, when are we going to see Ty Thompson at quarterback for Oregon? Anthony Brown for all that we've seen, he's QB1 for right now. And I think that, everyone's saying he's earned it, and that makes a lot of sense. He's the safe option. None of these other guys behind him have played a college down. They haven't even thrown the football at the college level. And Brown, and I think that part of that goes with, when we're talking about Brown, I think that Fresno State's going to be a good test to open things up. And then when you go to Columbus, that's going to be probably the biggest test he's ever faced. The biggest test a lot of these guys on the roster, regardless of how long they've been here, are going to face. So that's really big. I think Fresno State's probably going to be a win. I mean, I think the Ducks are positioning themselves well to be competitive in that Ohio State game, but man, that one's a toss-up. So who knows what's going to happen there. And then you also have 2 games after that when they're in Eugene. 3 of their first 4 games this season are at home in Eugene, which is great for a quarterback, especially if Anthony Brown's going to be having the bigger role like it's looking like. And then you have Stony Brook in Arizona. So that's really big. But I have a hard time seeing Ty Thompson, on the field this year, not from any fault of his own. The dude is incredibly gifted, probably the most gifted quarterback on the roster, honestly. But the Ducks are going to be, the expectation is that they're going to be contending for a Pac-12 title. So, I don't think Brown has to be playing super well to get them there, especially when you're looking at the talent that they've brought in. These wide receivers look like they're going to make a big name. The offensive line is looking deep as ever. The tight ends are crazy. And then running backs are very talented as well. So all those pieces are in place for Anthony Brown to have a tremendous season, or whoever ends up being quarterback. I have a piece up on Ducks Digest with Torres's take, kind of talking about what the Ducks need from the quarterback position this year. But as long as they're contending for the Pac-12, I think that we're going to see Anthony Brown behind center, or yeah, not directly behind center, but in shotgun, I should say, right? Because the Ducks like the spread and the pistol. So super, super encouraging stuff out of Ty Thompson. It is just the first spring scrimmage, so you don't want to put too much stuff in there. It is a long process, but certainly some cause for excitement. And, when you're looking at potentially this season, but certainly looking down the road for Ty Thompson at quarterback here in Eugene.